Hey everyone, Catch 'em All Collectibles here. In today's video, we are going to talk about the dangers and the risks of over speculation in a trading card game. Let's jump right into it. We've been doing a lot of these presentations lately. Here is our overview for today's presentation. Doomsday Scenario. We're going to start with panic. We're going to start with flashing red lights, emergency, danger. We're going to talk about the worst case scenario that can happen in a trading card game when speculation runs too rampant. Then we're going to break it down. We're going to break down some numbers provided by Pokemon specifically. I think everything that I'm saying in today's video could apply to any speculative asset, any collectible asset, whether it's Steins, whether it's Quaxley plushes, whether it's whatever it may be. But we'll talk through it mostly with respect to trading card games, Pokemon specifically. And then we'll close it out with as what this entire channel is. My strategy. What does everything I said in the prior slides mean? Bring it home with like what I'm actually doing. A hypothetical scenario. This is the Doomsday Scenario. If I knew how to edit, you would have red lines going all over. You would have explosions. You would have a dumpster fire. But here is like the worst case scenario that a TCG could be faced with. Some of these will be likened to TCGs that have been in our space. Some of these you might be able to liken to what happened to Pokemon after the boom from 1999 to 2001 ended, and then 2003, 2004 era, somewhere in there, you had $30, $40 base set unlimited booster boxes, Jungle first edition booster boxes on Hills Wholesale Gaming going mostly unsold. But worst case scenario, as well, I guess there's worst case scenarios. You could print a product and it could not sell anywhere, and no speculators, no investors, no consumers, nobody buys it. I guess that's the worst case scenario, that nobody buys it. A print run of X is sold to no one, and the stuff just goes to zero and never gets off the ground floor. But a print run of X sold out to 95% speculators could prolong a game, a TCG, sets of a game coming out, and could have even more fiery, drastic effects in the meantime through the cause of a speculative bubble. And then box prices run. There's an inaccessibility to players and collectors and consumers of the product. But there is an interest for some amount of people getting that, and speculators, investors playing on that interest, hoarding, scalping, whatever you want to call it, the boxes, and what the signal that would go to the printers, the signal that would go to the producers of that game, potentially the distributors, all the stuff sells out, secondary market prices go up like crazy, and hey, there's a demand out there. Not knowing when it went to 95% speculators. All arbitrary numbers that I'm using. It could be any percent, but okay, we printed X. If X is 1,000 boxes, 10,000 boxes, 100,000, a million boxes, whatever X is doesn't matter, and 95% is just arbitrary and made up. But yeah, if you as a game designer, as a print run determiner for a certain set, certain whatever, if you print out X and the price goes crazy, you decide, let's throw another X at it. Let's bring it up to 2X. Let's throw 4 times as much. Let's throw 10 times as much. Whatever number you throw, like you intended for X to be out in the wild. It wasn't enough. And so you doubled it, 2X. The risk that you run is you did some amount of math. You did some amount of like measuring and monitoring the market to determine what demand might be. And then you sold X and it wasn't enough. The prices went crazy. And when you print that second amount, that second X, again, it was 100,000 boxes, say, and then you print that additional 100,000 boxes. If and when you come to find out that speculative people were playing in that game, what you end up with is a potential environment where you have double the product you originally intended to produce, all hitting the market all at once. You print 100,000 boxes, 5,000 get opened by the end consumer, get ripped, get played with, whatever. 95,000 stored away into closets. And now you print wave 2, 100,000 more boxes. Now you originally intended to have 100,000 boxes out there. The price is doubled, tripled, whatever. And now you've got 195,000 boxes because only 5% of that original wave. This is a very drastic scenario, unlikely that any game has seen these high of numbers. But it just shows you that the risk of flooding the market with things that have intrinsic value of 0, they could be exacerbated greatly by artificial demand. And I think where I'm going to bring this all to is like, I hear a lot of these things in Pokemon. I hear everyone has everything in their closet. I hear it's just, oh, evolutions went to $1,000 a box. It's just investors selling back and forth. It's just the same people selling back and forth. It's fake sales. It's whatever. So this is like a hypothetical scenario. This is some anecdotes, some different conversations I've heard over my last 11 years in Pokemon. And then I'm going to like bring it home with some data. I'm going to bring it home with some actual experiences. And then, as I mentioned on the last slide, my strategy around all that. But like, this is my maybe poor attempt at just demonstrating to people like the ramifications of what people think is happening in modern Pokemon could actually kill Pokemon. If the numbers were large enough, they would have to be obscenely large, or it could kill other TCGs, and it has killed other TCGs. So yeah, that's like the worst case scenario, that everyone's investing. The people mistake that for consumer demand, and consumer demand, the print runs are massively increased, and then everything falls apart. The house of cards falls, right? That's what we don't want to have happen. This is what, and me, 11 years ago in Pokemon, when I saw the 2016 boom, when I saw evolutions do what it did, the print runs going up like crazy. Print runs are at historic numbers right now. But I always attributed some percent chance that this was actively going on in Pokemon. I still think today, when you hear all these different things, you hear modern sealed only goes up, the floor is $80 a box, the floor is distro prices. All these things said with overconfidence kind of makes me a little scared at times. I would still attribute less than a 1% chance probably that Pokemon is dead within 2 to 5 years, less than a 5% chance that it's even dead within 10 to 15 years likely. They almost died once. They almost died back when I left Pokemon, when almost everybody left Pokemon in the 2003 to 2004 era. But there's always some amount of risk, and I will actually come back to that on a later slide. 11.9 billion cards. So Pokemon in its entire history has printed like 65 billion cards. They've printed about half of those just in the past few years. In a 30-year history, Pokemon has printed about half of them. Half of what they printed in 30 years, they printed in the last 3 to 4 years. So a lot of things are being printed. And again, I've heard this is what's happening. I've heard that I've literally heard on forums and Reddit conversations, Facebook groups, I've heard that 90, 95%, 50%, same way I was making up numbers here, I've heard people make up numbers that like those 12 billion cards, that's just all investors, that's just all speculators, that's just all scalpers selling back and forth to themselves. There's no actual demand. There's not enough demand for that. I've heard negative things said about modern sealed investing, modern sealed speculating with respect to too many people investing in it. There always was that risk. I mean, if you watched my YouTube channel for 4 years, I've talked about those risks. Never have I said everyone's investing, these boxes are guaranteed to do XYZ. I've always said they could go up, could go down. That's Dan on the fence. That's the classic Dan answer for what can happen for a booster box price or a graded card price. But yeah, let's do some numbers. Let's do some math. We've got 11.9 billion cards. That was what they sold in fiscal 2023. We should be finding out in the next couple of months what they sold in fiscal 2024. I believe they report on March to March, like March through March of 2024. They should be reporting that. If they do as they did the last couple of years, they should be reporting on that in June. So I'll be interested to see what those numbers are. If everything was English cards, they're not, clearly. There's Chinese, there's Japanese, there's all different kinds of languages. There's, throughout Pokemon's 30-year history, going on 30-year history, there's been a lot of different languages. I'm not an expert. I think base set was like 11 or 13 languages, and there's 11 or 13 languages in the last couple of years. Worlds promo packs that they give out to the competitors. But anyways, let's just pretend everything's English. Let's pretend everything is English. I would assume the majority are English and or Japanese. The vast majority would be English and Japanese. Let me know in the comments out there if you're watching still. 9.5 minutes in. Do you think more is printed in English or in Japanese, the original language? I would lean towards English, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was like 45% Japanese, 45% English, and 10% other. Or even 48%, 48%, and then 4% other. If I really had to guess at the end of the day, if I had to throw a number out there, complete guess, that's what I would go with. I think 48% English, 48% Japanese, 4% other. Let me know your guess in the comments below. Let's just pretend it's all English though. Let's go worst case scenario. There's 5 sets per year on average. If you do the math, 11.9 billion cards divided by 360, that's how many booster boxes would be printed. 33 million booster boxes total printed from 11.9 billion if it's all in English. And again, say you don't like that, multiply that by 0.48. You would get about 16, 17 million booster boxes total, right? 5 sets per year on average. 6 million booster box printed per set, very roughly, if everything was English. So you only go down from here. This is a limit, because I hear people say it all the time. We have energy cards, we have this and that. One thing with the energy cards though, I don't have a booster pack near me. Oh, no, wait, I do. So 151 says 10 additional game cards. I'm going to rip one right now. 151 on it, right on the bottom. Let me make sure I capture that. 151. I've heard people say 11.9 billion cards. Well, there's code cards, there's energy cards, there's everything like that. So at the bottom it says 10 additional game cards, and then I count in the pack. Let's see what I pull. 1, 2, 3, the worst pack opening ever. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Imagine if I hit something big. 9, 10, and then the energy and the code. So I've heard many times, still, even though it says on it 10 additional game cards, you get 10 Pokemon cards, and then you get an energy and a code card, free code for someone if they want it. They could still factor those 12 cards into the 11.9 billion number, but it's just interesting that they omit them based on what they say on the wrapper. I've never heard someone else bring that up, so I figured I'd bring it up in the middle of a long video so that nobody could hear it. But anyways, there's my little contribution. It may be some novel thinking towards, 11.9 billion cards. Most of them are energies. Most of them are this. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But even if they aren't, so let's say they don't count them. Let's say that only 10 of those 12 cards, 10 cards, 1 code, 1 energy, only 10 counted. Well, 6 million booster boxes, if they're all English cards, if they're all English booster boxes, there's other languages. There's also other products. There's promos. There's promos that they release in mass. There's the Gray Felt Hat Pikachu. Did they make 1 million of those? Did they make 200,000 of them? 5 million of them? We don't really know exactly, but there's pre-constructed decks. So almost certainly, I can't be positive, but almost certainly when they make the battle decks, when they make the pre-release kits, all the different products that generate actual Pokemon cards, those factor into the number. So the absolute ceiling on the average set, and we know, I guess we don't know for sure, but we can heavily we can heavily presume, not assume, we can presume with good data that we don't have flat print runs by set. So to be fair, 6 million booster boxes wouldn't be the ceiling for any individual set, because some are printed more than others. Almost certainly 151 is being printed significantly more than a team up or something like that. Not only because it's in a different year where more cards were printed, but because it got significantly more waves of reprints. Anyways, continuing on, 6 million booster box printed, that kind of gives us a ceiling average. And one little bit of math that I've shared, if I remember, I'll link the video above. My live streaming operation for 2025, we did 4,000 packs 2 weeks ago. I think last week we did like 3,500 packs, but I'm likely to have a third streamer at some point throughout the year. I am very likely to rip the equivalent of 6,000 boxes worth of packs. It's about 6,000 times 36, about 216,000 packs. Could end up being 250,000, could be slightly more. But I'm one little operation. PK's a full-time guy. He's streaming for me. Ponga is a side hustler doing it on the side. Two guys streaming for me. One guy doing the sourcing. We're on pace to rip 6,000 booster box equivalents. And if you do the math there, it's like 6 million, 6,000. It's a clean bit of math there. If there were 1,000 of me, if there were 1,000 I mean, what a world that would be. I don't wish that on planet Earth. There were 1,000 of me specifically, 1,000 of me exactly. But if there were 1,000 operations, similar size to Catch 'em All Collectibles Incorporated, we wouldn't consume some percentage of the product. We would rip. Well, so that's per set. So we would need 5,000 of me, I guess. We would need 1,000 of me to rip all of the. If we ripped all one set, we would need 1,000 of me to rip all of one set in a year. If we ripped everything, we 5,000 of me would rip every single Pokemon card ever printed. And again, we can probably cut that number fairly safely in half, just because 48, 50, whether it's 70%, 30%, we're in the ballpark. Whether it's 30 to 70% of all product printed is English, then we have to cut it down again, because what percent is promos? What percent is the battle decks? What percent is... It would be reasonable to me, maybe if that number was 20%, because how much of it actually goes to English booster packs? English booster packs. So you start doing some rough numbers there, and it's like, yeah, about 1,000 of Dan's operations. There's not 1,000. There's definitely not 1,000 pack rippers on Whatnot, on Drip, on Fanatics, on eBay, on all these other platforms. There's definitely not 1,000 operations as big or bigger than me, but there are some that are 10 times the size of mine, and there are tons there are thousands that are smaller than mine. So you've got, like, that would actually be one bit of interesting information. If we, Nick and I, could ever get somebody on PokeFlips from eBay Live, from Fanatics Live, from Whatnot, there's got to be some people out there, probably at Pokemon themselves. If I worked at Pokemon, I would do some kind of market research towards the size of the market, towards, like, I wouldn't just print 11.9 billion cards willy-nilly, and I'm sure they're not either. I'm sure Pokemon has had this thought. Pokemon literally lived through this before, back in 2003, 2004. So I'm sure Pokemon has someone doing the math, estimating how many of these cards are being consumed by actual end consumers, collectors, players, whatever it may be. I'm quite confident. I wish we could get our way at that data. I can tell you about how much work I'm doing, my operation is doing towards helping out the investors and speculators, right? But that's just one little guy. I'm sure there are people with actual fairly decent market research done, more than one guy in an hour building a PowerPoint presentation. Probably would be really interesting to see the results of some people diving really deep into the data. But anyways, so that's just one perspective of looking at it. My operation, how much packs we're ripping, how much we're consuming, 6,000 boxes. That's yeah, again, like I said, that's 200,000 packs. That's 2 million cards. 2 million of the 12 billion cards are being consumed through my little operation. So how many of us do you think are out there? And then another way to look at it too, there are 36 million booster packs worth of Moonbreon graded at PSA. So if you look here, shout out to TCG Player Infinite, they do every set. They open 8,000, 10,000 packs, 12,000 packs, and they tell you what the pull rates are for the hit cards from it. I looked up Celebrations Charizard, pop 30,000, 1 per 100 packs. This was one of the biggest numbers I could find. Very popular card, very valuable card, few years old, so a lot of them are graded by now. If you look at Terrestrial Festival, the Umbreon 217, I believe it is, from that one, there's already like 16,000 graded, and it's only been a couple months, and it's wild how many of these cards are getting graded. But anyways, there have been 21,200 Umbreons graded from Evolving Skies. 1 in 2,000 pull rate nearly. I actually, like, I went to the lower end. I rounded down to 36 million booster packs of Moonbreons being graded, and this is just PSA. This is not BGS, CGC, this is not TAG, this is not ACE, this is not AGS, all these different companies. To be fair, it's probably over 90% of all the cards graded were graded at PSA. But 21,200 of them graded. If you do the math, it's actually more like 42 million packs. I've heard numbers as low as a 1 in 1,000 pull rate. 1 in 2,000 pull rate is about the highest I've ever heard it described as. I don't know which one's more accurate, but 1 million booster boxes. 1 million booster boxes worth of packs, 36 million packs. Again, it could come from Charizard UPCs, from Evolving Skies booster boxes, could be coming from anywhere, and they likely are coming from everywhere. But 1 million booster boxes worth of packs, worth of Umbreon have been graded. I don't know for sure here, but I know PSA is grading about 10 million cards a year. I think PSA in January of this year, I want to say they're almost up to where they're grading 1 million Pokemon cards a month, which is just obscene. It's crazy. It's nuts. Absolutely insane. I think it's 1 million cards a month, but high proportion of that being Pokemon. Most cards, though, I don't have a percentage to give you. Like I did up here I'm just guessing. I'm just guessing at what percentages are English versus Japanese. It's hard to wager a guess at what percentage of product is graded versus what isn't graded. The more popular the card is, the more valuable the card is, the more likely it is to be graded. I didn't do it for this video, but if you look through the pull rates on all the VMAXs are presumed to be the same in all sets. So like if you look at the Rayquaza, less Rayquazas were graded than Umbreons because of the value differential. Less Sylveons, less other cards of the same rarity tier in that set would have been graded less. So Umbreon is the one that is most graded, but if I was forced to give a guess, I don't think 10% of those cards that were opened were graded. I don't think grading is that ubiquitous. Some people would say, I've heard people say this, and I've heard people say this probably back when the pop was 10,000. I've heard people say when the pop was 10,000 that I would need to dig deep into the archives, go through old YouTube videos, go through old forum posts and Discord posts and whatever. But I remember when the pop was about 10,000, people speculating that probably 30% of them were graded, or 50% of them in existence were graded. It's more than double, so clearly 50% weren't graded at the time. Again, let me know in the comments below. I'm going to give you a couple bits of work to do if you're watching this video. In the comments below, with 21,000 graded, some amount are regrades, yes. But what percent of Moonbreons that were opened do you think were graded? I would honestly think it would be 10 to 20%. I think that for every one slab of a card like that, there's 9 raw cards. I could be entirely wrong. Maybe it is a quarter of them, a third of them. I could not be convinced. I don't think anyone could debate me on that or could convince me into half of Umbreons that were pulled ever in existence. Some amount being sealed still, however many are being sealed. I don't think I could ever be talked into half of them being graded. People tried saying that back at 10,000. We're at 22,000 now. So I just don't see it whatsoever. But I could be wrong. Let me know if you've got a convincing debate down in the comments. Let me know. But things like this make me feel very good and make me feel more confident that we're not in this doomsday scenario. To some amount, I've heard of it being reprinted 7 times or something. We got close to this in Pokemon. I think we've seen it in other TCGs. I think we've seen it in other games. I mean, Medizu. I've got Medizu boxes behind me. 2,500 Kickstarter boxes were made. 25,000 Cryptid Nation First Edition. 50,000 Nightfall. If we ended Medizu there, I think at the time, Kickstarter was $10,000 a box. 6 to 10,000. Cryptid Nation First Edition was 600 to 1,000 a box. Nightfall was 200 to 300 a box. And then how much of that was speculation? In hindsight, it feels like a large amount of it was speculation. Feels like bad things were going on. The people printing it at the time, presumably, feels like in hindsight, they were seeing a lot of that as organic demand, or demand that would, hey, we can increase the print run even more and all will be well, all will be fine. They went to 100,000, UFO, Seance, MS Wilderness too. And a lot of the things got dumped. A lot of things were sold in very high amounts to separate people. I think Flesh and Blood experienced this too, but I guess I don't want to say names. There were names of companies. I think some of the companies have gone defunct. I think some of the companies were sold, rebranded, restructured, whatever. But there were large Amazon dump-esque type things from very, very high hoarders of the product. And there's risks. The more, just to add to this on the first slide, I think, and I could be wrong here, I've never built a game, I've never distributed a game like that. In a perfect scenario, you would print X amount of product and you would have you would have the most individual owners of that you could. Say you could choose as a game designer, as a game printer, whether you're Pokemon, whether you're Medizu, whether you're whoever, Lorcana, Flesh and Blood, if you could print 100,000 boxes and you could either have 100 boxes go to 1,000 game stores each, or have 10,000 boxes go to 10 individual owners, 10 individual game stores. The one where the things are spread more thinly is just inherently less volatile and inherently more safe, right? So yeah, high portions of high speculative people, or at least if the people speculate to a high level, you hope it's more of a Rudy type situation where they're likely to be able to weather and likely to have the conviction to weather out the storm if and when it comes. I mean, look at Rudy with his positions of thousands of boxes through the Scarlet Violet era a year ago, where boxes were available 90, 100 bucks a piece. And in hindsight, it doesn't seem like he panic sold. In hindsight, it seems like he did very well on his investments there, his speculations there. But that's a little bit of ranting, rambling about what I'm seeing in the current market for when it comes down to Pokemon. That sounds like a big scary number. It is a big scary number. But some of the math here, just looking at what I do personally, my business does personally towards consuming that product, and looking at what some of these big chase cards do to consume that product, it makes me feel good. Again, with just what we showed here from Umbreon, that is 1 million boxes worth of product. And we saw here, Evolving Skies could be towards the higher end because it was a more heavily printed one. They printed a lot of them. Reprints came out, brought it down to 120, on and on and on. But just one chase card being graded at one company. And obviously when those 22,000 Umbreons were pulled, it's not like Rayquazas weren't being pulled. So like all the other cards were being pulled too, just not as many of those were being graded. But anyways, let me continue on. That goes to show, maybe not all of it, but I'm quite confident it's not 95% speculation. I'm quite confident it's not even 50% speculation. Refining those numbers, how far can you get down? It's layers and layers of estimations. But I feel fairly comfortable. I guess I'd feel more comfortable if the number was 6 or 8 billion. I'd feel more comfortable if the number was lower. But I don't feel like 90, 95%, even 50% of this product is just being hoarded, sold between speculator. My position in 2025, I think I fully disclosed my position last about a year ago now or so. I'm down to one singular sealed case of Evolving Skies booster box. I think I have a couple loose boxes here or there, but I have one remaining sealed case. So yeah, I mean, with what it did recently, going to over 1,200, 1,500 a box, I've been trickling some out. I think I had 2 or 3 back when I last made a video a year ago, and I'm down to 1. It hit price targets significantly earlier than I ever would have expected. So yeah, on that note, let me get down to my strategy. I kind of started talking about it there. I've been talking about in many videos and many live streams. I see Pokemon, I see TCGs in general in 2025 being kind of like the immovable object. They are the story of the immovable object versus the unstoppable force. And I don't know who wins that battle. Right now, who's winning? So, immovable object being 11.9 billion cards. Just picture a mountain of cards that is like, obviously it didn't work this way. They don't print everything for 1 year and have a mountain of 11.9 billion cards and say, hey, now we're going to ship them out. They ship them out as they print. But imagine if they did. That 11.9 billion card mountain would be an immovable object. But hey, Catch 'em All Collectibles is on one side of the base of that mountain. PK and Ponga by my side. I'm scooping out the packs. I'm pushing into PK and Ponga, and they are ripping. They are ripping like mad. We are doing our part as part of the unstoppable force. We are one component of the unstoppable force. And that's the pack rips, the live streams. Consumers are too, but investors, speculative demand from investors who are just buying it to sit on it to ultimately sell it for more down the line. They're buying it, they're consuming it, they're making the price go up. They're buying it, they're making the price go up, but they're not consuming it. So even though there's some amount of the demand, that product still exists in sealed form. That product still is part of the immovable object, right? If everyone's speculating, if in hindsight, maybe someday, and I'll have to like remember to go back and clip this and say, there is some percent chance. I attribute less than a 1% chance that in 2030, I will come back and I will clip this moment and say that Pokemon, in hindsight, clearly was what I thought it wasn't. Clearly, this was going on more than I thought in Pokemon. In 2030, this is me in retrospect saying that. I don't think I'll be saying that. Less than a 1% chance. Pokemon is like it was in 2003, 2004. Boxes are down 80%. Boxes that sold for 90 at wholesale in whatever the next block is, being sold for 40, 50 bucks, barely being sold. That truly is, though, that truly is the downside. That could happen. The intrinsic value of this stuff is 0. I attribute less than a 1% chance, but it should factor into your math some percent chance. And that's in Pokemon. So in Pokemon, I would give less than a 1% chance, all made up numbers, a little bit educated, slightly educated guesses. Less than a 1% chance it is that dark. 2003, 2004 era darkness in 2030. I would give less than a 5% chance it's that in 2040, 15 years from now. 15 years ago, I wasn't even in Pokemon. I've been in longer than most people, I think, watching this video. 11 years I've been back into Pokemon. I'm making highly speculative guesses about 15 years from now. We can't even wrap our minds around what 15 years in the future society will even look like. And people make these oh, I'm gonna buy Pokemon. It beats the S&P 500. I'm gonna hold it 5, 10, 25, 50 years, and my Evolving Skies box is gonna be worth $50,000. It's like, we don't even know what the world reserve currency will be in 50 years. Hopefully it's the US dollar. Hopefully we have an unstoppable run for the next 50, 100 plus years. But the confidence with which, and the confidence with which people make these claims, who have been in the hobby for 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, I don't care if it's 6 years, I don't care if you have been in it for the entire 30 years. The confidence people make these claims that sealed only goes up and similar is scary. It makes me want to revise my 1% chance by 2030 up to 1.5%, 2% chance. I truly think it's not going to happen. I believe it's going to perform well, which is why I'm holding it. And but I also, to kind of help myself, I'm Dan on the fence, playing both sides of it. I've got PK and Pongo over here ripping, and over here on the other side of the fence, I've got me and my dad building investments by the pallet. And I'm not the only one doing that, but clearly I'm not the only one ripping either. So literally, I am part of both the immovable object with my pallets, and I am part of the unstoppable force. And I'm sitting on the fence that those two are fighting over, and I hope the unstoppable force wins. I hope that one wins, because that's better for the hobby. That's better for me as a business. That's better for everyone that wants Pokemon to succeed. Because if the immovable object wins, we have 2003, we have 2004. We have Metazoo going into bankruptcy, right? I don't want that for Pokemon, for Metazoo's renewal, I don't want that for Flesh and Blood. I don't engage with Flesh and Blood. I don't engage with Yu-Gi-Oh! I don't engage with Magic hardly at all. Sometimes people can sign single graded cards with me, but the sealed product, I don't engage with whatsoever. I don't want that to happen to any of them. A lot of people like Magic. A lot of people like Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of people like Flesh and Blood. I want those things to succeed. I want people to get their joy they get from those. So, and as I said, investors win when people collect and consume. And if everyone is investing, and in 99, not everyone was investing. And even with original Metazoo, not everyone was investing. Look at the pop reports. Look at the tournaments they had. Maybe a ton of people didn't go, but some amount of people went. Some amount of people, dozens of them went and played. Dozens of them were collecting. Dozens of people were building binders like I was myself. If you want to check out my Metazoo video, I think I made a pretty good Metazoo video for my plan on Metazoo revival coming up soon in a few weeks. But yeah, I as I said too, I was talking about my pallets. I'm going to be doing a recap on pallet 1 in May. I need to rewatch that video before I make video 2, recapping it 1 year later. I've looked at the numbers on what the initial investment has grown to, and so many times in Pokemon, literally every time in Pokemon that I've made a guess tied to a date with a certain price for a certain sealed product, especially, I've always undershot it. Like, it, obviously only one outcome can happen. If I say that there's a 1% chance, I think, that Pokemon will be like on life support in 2030. If it ends up on life support, then was I right or was I wrong? I wasn't right or wrong in either instance, right? Because I'm like a weatherman. You can't be wrong when you say that there's this percent chance of this and this percent chance of that. 99% chance it won't go on life support. So if it ended up not on life support, I wasn't necessarily right or wrong. That's just what happened. And yes, it hit my most likely outcome. But yeah, people get so hung up on like, oh man, someone said something could go down and then it didn't go down, so they were wrong. Like no, that's like you go to a roulette wheel, and not to like this the straight up gambling. People don't like that analogy. But if you go to a roulette wheel and you put your money on black and it hits black, you weren't right to place that bet. You made money, but you weren't like, there was only a 48% chance of that happening. And then it happened, and okay, you made money. Making money doesn't mean you're right in your in your guesses or whatever. But and losing money doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. But I digress. I feel like I've talked about that topic many times recently as well. But ultimately, going back to my analogy to bets that I was making, that's probably why I made it, because I saw that last point there. Place your bets. There are people who have just been screeching from both sides on, like, and mind you, I am on a YouTube channel. No one asked for this video. I'm just throwing my 2 cents out there. I'm throwing my noise out there to contribute to it. But there are people that get like really emotional, really worked up, and I can't say I haven't had that happen at all to me in the past years on debates on different YouTube channels, whatever it may be. There are people that get really emotional, really worked up on both sides. Everyone's investing. It's all going to zero. The house of cards will fall. And then other people like, no, it only goes up, and just place your bets. Like everyone sees the same data. Everyone sees the same information. We all use that. Hear what I say. Hear what others say. Place your bets, or don't too. Like you don't have to bet either. You don't have to bet on any of it. You can consume whatever way you're consuming. You can not consume at all. If you're not consuming Pokemon at all, I don't know how you found your way here, but welcome. You're welcome as well. But yeah, like this is just an example. This is not me. Say like these numbers here. These are made up numbers, because there's no item that I could point to in Pokemon with a 10% chance it goes to zero. Zero being a very dark number. Like, I think Pokemon going to zero, it would have to be at least 15 years from now. I could be wrong. Some people would say it can't go to zero. That's just wrong. There's some percent chance that it could. The perfect storm of things that could cause Pokemon to die in 15 years would be like, I mean, we went through a Great Depression in the 30s, 1930s. What if the 2030s are a Great Depression 2.0? I hope I don't cause that into existence. I don't think I would be the first, but literally roaring 2030s, I hope is not Great Depression 2.0, but it could be. We could have some global catastrophes. We could have some global turmoil that happens, multi-year depression. Things get dark and rough, and Pokemon doesn't, it's not a certainty that it makes it to 2040. But anyways, say you, through all your work, all your effort, all your research, you determine a product has a 10% chance to go to zero, 80% chance it'll be between 80 and 150, and a 10% chance it'll be 500 over some duration. Like, you just calculated the EV, and say your chance to buy it was at that's the expected value, 0 times 0.1, 0.8 times the average of those two numbers, and then 0.1 times 500. Now, if you say your duration was 1 year, there's no Pokemon product clearly that I would give a 10% chance of going to zero. But say I was buying it for 90 and my EV was 142, the expected value in a year. Well, that would be a $52 gain on 90. Take away fees and stuff. You'd have to ship it. You'd have to blah, blah, blah. Say that would be that would be a 33% growth in 1 year after fees. That would be worthwhile. All else considered, like 90 going to 120 after fees, that would be like, hey, this is a pretty decent investment. Everything taken into context matters too. If you could find one with a similar expected growth rate with 0 chance or less chance of going to zero, that would be even more worthwhile, all depending on your risk tolerance, all depending on your other situations. But yeah, a lot of ranting and rambling in this video. I did not think this was going to take 40 minutes, but when the presentations come out, I think it's very hard for me to have a presentation video under 30 minutes long. There's a lot of my conversation, thoughts, feelings, plans, business strategies around sprint runs, and I didn't mean to switch over to that one with the overlays, but that's all my thoughts on that. I asked you guys to do a couple comments throughout, as I usually do late in the video, just so I can see who's still awake at the end. Give me a is there a mountain emoji? Give me a mountain emoji, or just type mountain if you made it this far to reference the mountains of product. I only have a couple pallets, but I am working. I'm pallet 2 is almost closed. I'll make a video about that one when it ends. Pallet 3 is going to be underway soon. I actually was just hanging out with my dad some tonight had a little family get together, and it's, I mean, intrinsic value 0. There are risks, unlike some people will tell you, but in spite of everything, in spite of all the risks, in spite of the fact that I think investing is happening to the highest level it ever has in Pokemon, I think the prospects are still uh, good enough for me that this is not advice for anyone to do the same. As always, consider your opportunity cost. But all things that I see, I am planning on continuing, if not slightly leveling up what I'm doing in Pokemon speculation. And I don't use the I word this late in the video because the ones who stuck around are more likely the ones who know what I'm saying when I say speculating in Pokemon. But yeah, as always, happy Monday. I appreciate you all watching. I will catch you all later.